Good morning, third grade champions. Good to see you today. Today I have as my background the Truist Stadium, formerly known as the SunTrust Stadium, or before that the Atlanta Braves Stadium. It is in Atlanta, Georgia, because the Braves are a team that I grew up with. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and had an opportunity to enjoy many Braves games at Turner Field. And so I'm celebrating the Braves today, since our Spirit Day is Sports Day. And also a little shout out to the Panthers, since we can see the Bank of America Stadium from our school, which is pretty cool. And so giving them a little shout out as well. And also, you probably know that if we were in school, today is the day we were to enjoy our school musical, The Lion King Jr. We were to be at the Halton Theater at CPCC enjoying the Lion King Jr. musical this evening. So I have my little Lion King pen, and hopefully we'll enjoy that musical together in the future, in the not too distant future. So we are reading The Puppy Place, and I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and begin chapter 9, page 94. And the reason I'm going to is that this is kind of at a pivot point in the book where Freckles and they bonded, if you will, and then everyone's asleep, and then there's something that happens with Freckles and Fluffy. So we're going to begin chapter 9, page 94. Steve scrambled down the ladder. Dad leapt off the couch. What? Where? Dad said, rubbing his eyes. How? Steve was already pulling his boots and jacket on. I woke up in the middle of the night and went out to check on the snow. Maybe they slipped out behind me. Charles slid out of the sleeping bag and ran for his own jacket and boots. A moment later, he and Dad and Steve were all outside yelling for Freckles and Fluffy. The snow was still coming down, swirling out of the dim early morning sky. Charles followed Steve from the back door to the sugaring shed. The heavy, wet snow came up above his knees. It was tough going, slogging through the drifts. Where'd they go? Steve asked, waving his arms. His face was red and his eyes were wide. We'll find them, Charles said. We have to find them. He had never seen Steve look upset before. He pictured the little puppy and the soft baby lamb floundering through the snow, and his heart sank. This was exactly the kind of thing Dad had meant about why Steve didn't want pets. Too much responsibility. They're not around back, Dad said, coming from the other side of the cabin. I didn't see any tracks at all. Okay, said Steve. He took a few deep breaths as if to calm himself. We'll have to search farther from the house. We'll need snowshoes. He headed for the cabin, then stopped short when he came close to the door. Oh no, he said, stooping over to look more closely. The poor little guy. What is it? Charles asked. He and his dad joined Steve by the door. Someone tried to get our attention, Steve said, pointing to the bottom of the door. At one corner, the blue paint was scratched all the way down to the bare wood. Charles felt his heart skip a beat. That must have been Freckles scratching to be let in, he said. Exactly, said Steve. They got out, but then they couldn't get back inside. And I bet Fluffy was bleeding too, said Dad. How could we have slept through that? Steve grunted and stood up. We were really tired, he said, and the sound of the wind must have been louder. Anyway, we didn't hear them. Now we have to find them. He grabbed snowshoes from their hooks inside the mudroom and handed them around. But how do we know where to look? There aren't any tracks to follow, Dad said. The storm wiped them out. And we wiped them out, said Charles, suddenly realizing what had happened. We can't see any tracks right around here because we ran around and messed everything up. Maybe if we just go a little bit farther, we'll see something. Just what I was thinking, said Steve as he buckled on his snowshoes. Let's go. He plunged off into the snow. A moment later, Dad and Charles followed. It was not easy slogging through the deep snow. Charles's snowshoes punched through the heavy, wet drifts, no matter how carefully he tried to walk. He felt like he was tripping over his own feet. He had to lift his knees high for each step. as if he was marching. The snow melted around the top of his boots and his wet socks squelched as he walked. It was exhausting. "Take it easy, Sport," said Dad from behind him. Dad was breathing hard too. "Don't try to rush. It only makes it harder." But Charles felt like he had to rush. If he felt cold and wet and tired and frustrated, think how those two baby animals must feel out there on their own. "I think I see tracks," Steve shouted. Charles saw him stoop over, then kneel down in the snow. "Yes!" Charles and Dad caught up to him, and Steve showed them the indentations in the snow. "They're blurry because the snow is still falling, but I'm almost sure these are recent." "I don't get it," Dad said. "Why would they wander even farther away from the house? I mean, here they are out in a howling snowstorm. Wouldn't you think they would try to find shelter?" Charles stared at Dad. "That's it," he said. Steve looked confused for a moment. Then his face lit up and he nodded at Charles. "You're right." He stood up. "Let's go." To Charles, it was so obvious. If the animals needed shelter, Freckles knew where to find it. That's where he would have gone. That's where he would have taken his friend. To the cave. To the place where he first found Freckles, Charles said, following Steve up the trail. Sure enough, the blurry tracks turned off the main trail toward the pine forest, just as they had on that first day. Steve was charging through the snow now, and Charles and Dad struggled to keep up. I'm going to stop there on the bottom of page 99, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. Thank you, third graders. Take care. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe. Bye now.